Greetings, adventurers. This is Historian Erud, and I'm back with another EverQuest Lore video. And today I would like to discuss the low to mid-level, not even mid-level, let's just say low-level dungeon of Befallen. This dungeon is tied to a massive amount of lore, and I'm not going to speak too much on it. We're just going to get right into it because I have a lot to cover. So we will start off with our story proper, with its history and origin. So to begin, to understand the forces and objects found within Befallen, it is necessary to understand its history. This history is largely forgotten by the people of Norath today, and learning even as much as this brief outline can serve as the basis for a quest itself. Just to make note, this is the Befallen tabletop RPG guide. And so let's keep that in mind as we're reading. But the lore, as I see it, is canon. We're going to see it, the lore tied to several quests within the game that I'm going to tie into this video. So without further ado, or rather we already begun, so let's continue. Such knowledge may also prove critical in the ultimate Befallen quest, the cleansing of the dungeon and destruction of the foul power that inhabits it. And to some degree, we're going to experience that through the quest. So let's discuss the origin of Befallen. Befallen is one of the most infamous dungeons of all of Norath, but it was not originally built to serve as a home to undead and dark magic. It was designed and built by the Order of Mars Fist, a guild of knights and clerics dedicated to the twin gods, Arolasi and Mithanel Mar. Important to note, this is not the Paladin / Clerics Guild in Freeport. Both guilds, they're two separate guilds. This is not, those guilds can't come out of this, but we're going to understand that Order of Mars Fist predates the guilds in Freeport, Knights of Truth, etc. The Order of Mars Fist is the progenitor. Continuing. The Order needed a stronghold to aid them in their efforts to pacify and patrol the Commonlands. Already in control of Freeport, the Order saw this, their westerly stronghold, called the Chapter House of the Fist, as a way to expand their forces throughout the western Commonlands. Under the command of High Lord William Taros, the Order set about their business. That's very important to note that Befallen as we know it today is not how it once was, and we're actually getting the backstory now. Befallen was the Chapter House of the Fist, which was an outpost of the Order of Mars Fist, which had control of Freeport at the time and was expanding through the Commonlands, etc. Continuing on. Now, having two strong bases, the Order of Mars Fist spread their influence from the Ocean of Tears to Kithakor Forest, securing roads, eliminating bandits, and driving the Death Fist Oryx to the brink of extinction. When the Knights of the Order found things of dangerous power, they stored them away deep within the chapter house for safekeeping. Among these objects was an ancient elven weapon of power known as the Thex Mallet. All right, so very important to note as well that the Thex Mallet, there's a quest line that we're going to cover that's very important to the lore of Neriak and the Dark Elves, but also the elves in general. And so we're gonna take a look at that when that point in the story comes up. All right, now let's continue. After many decades of success, the Order suffered a critical setback. A patrol of paladins found a sick, starved, half-mad wanderer in the western Commonlands. Though he was barely able to speak, the paladins learned his name was Gainak Moltor. In his fevered ramblings, Moltor claimed he had been cursed by Knoll shamans and driven into exile. Concerned for his safety, the patrol brought him back to the chapter house in hopes of nursing him to health. Unbeknownst to the Order, Moltor had a long history of unscrupulous behavior, but his vile betrayal within Befallen was the worst. All right, so they're foreshadowing, but this guy is trouble. A petty thief and smuggler, Gynok had managed to rise to a position of power and authority within the merchant community of Kinos, long ago through shady deals and blackmail. When a caravan set out to find a commerce route from Quinos to Hollis, Gynok managed to secure a position on it. The group nearly died in the frozen lands of the north, but they made it to Hollis. There, the barbarians told them of a quicker path between Hollis and Quinos, through the burrow of the Black Burrow Knolls. Now, this is very important to note. We only know of one pathway between Hollis and Quinos in EverQuest, and that's through Black Burrow. But we have to take in the context that this is happening prior to our time. So there may have been a pre-existing route that is no longer accessible or available today or current game time. Current era. Continuing on. An expedition was arranged to see if a route through the Gnolls territory could be established. The expedition was met by Opala of Blackburrow, an old and wise Gnoll shaman who saw that her people needed to live peacefully with their neighbors if they were to thrive. All right, so those of us who played priest classes, will know of the Paw of Opala in the Paw of Opala quest. And this is the origin of that quest line. So we're going to read what happens in the narrative, then we're going to take a look at the quest, and then we're going to return back to the narrative. Okay. Opala met the traders in peace and offered to put out a feast in their honor. When the traders asked how they could be sure the other Gnolls would obey Opala, she showed them the 4 rings she wore on her right hand, the badge of her authority. And we know that you have to collect these 4 rings in the quest, but I don't want to spoil it too much. Let's not even get into that. Let's continue. Immediately, Gynok lusted after these rings and schemed to steal them. After the feast, when other traders and Gnolls were asleep, he snuck into Opala's quarters and tried to remove the rings. Oh, really quickly, this is a map of the Commoners, Nectalos, Freeport, but there are other areas you may not be familiar with. Freeside, you may be familiar with the Berry Pass and Serpent Spine Mountains if you played later expansions. River of Mar. So I'm assuming that river that we see flowing through Nectalos Forest potentially could be, I don't know. Speculate, but let's get back to it. You see Brighthaven Wizard spot. So there's a bunch of areas that we are not familiar with, but this is a different time period. All right, continuing on. But Opala awoke and began to raise an alarm. Gynok panicked and cut off the shaman's hand to retrieve the rings. All right, so Gynok snuck to steal her rings while she was sleeping. She woke up, alerted other Gnolls, and what does Gynok do? I got to get these rings. And he chops her hand off to steal it. Continuing. The shaman survived and refused to allow the traders to be killed, as they had entered the Gnolls' home under her promise of safety. All right, so Gynok was with others. Remember, he was high ranking with the merchants of Quinos, and he was with others. He didn't care about them though. He wanted those rings, and to show you just how noble of a Gnoll Opala was, who was leading the Black Burrow, she didn't even kill the other traders that he was not traitors, but traders he was with. She didn't even kill them. She gave them. She kept to her word and gave them safe passage through their territory, even though she just got her hand cut off by one of their associates. But continuing. But she declared a war between the Gnolls of Blackburrow and the humans of Quinos and barbarians of Hollis. So now we understand where Fippy Dogpaw comes from and why he's so upset, and why all the other Gnolls are so upset, or why you're a level 1 and you get attacked. The entire conflict between Quinos and the Blackburrow Gnolls, the saber-toothed Gnolls of Blackburrow, all originated from this creep, Gynok. But continuing on. She also cursed Gynok Motor and his family, and the angry residents of Quanos banished him for his evil act. All right, so what he did caused him to get exiled from Quanos or Kinos. Some of y'all are probably getting like, it's Quanos. Oh, it's Kinos. And, people get whatever worked up over it, but it was a text-based game. You pronounce it however you've been pronouncing it. So forgive me if my pronunciation doesn't match up with yours, but I'm gonna do my best to pronounce them as best as I know, or give both versions. Continuing. Some months later, he was led into Befallen by the Knights of the Order of Mars Fist, starving and dehydrated. All right, so this guy was already a bastard by the time the Knights find him, the Order of Mars Fist. All right, continuing. All right, this is the depiction of Gynok right here. Some months later, he was led into... Oh, sorry, I already read that part. Once Gynok had recovered his wits somewhat, he repaid this kindness by killing the knights watching over him, sacrificed them on a defiled altar to any god willing to give him the power to destroy Blackborough and Kinos. So there you have it. Like this guy's already went over the edge. He doesn't care what deity will give him the power as long as he gets the power. The dark, cursed magic that answered his call indeed gave him such power, but also bound him to the site of his vile deed, preventing him from ever using that power to gain his desires. The exact nature of the dread power that answered Moltor's call is not well understood, even to this day, and at best can only be described as a thinking malignant force. Creating a cloud of black, foul necromancy, this force destroyed all those who dwell within the chapter house. Even Gynok was killed, although he was raised within minutes as an undead himself. So this is very important to note that whatever force that he preyed upon, we don't exactly know what it was that answered him. Was it a deity? Was it some other entity? We have no idea. Demigod? We don't know. But it empowered him in such a way that killed off everyone inside the chapter house, but it brought him back and gave him immortality. But although he becomes more powerful when he has immortality, he cannot leave Befallen. He can't leave the chapter house. He's stuck there. Continuing. Actually, before we continue, let's touch on the Paw of Opala, because I'd be remiss if I didn't get to that first.